My girlfriend said she was doing charity work by dating beneath her tax bracket. I told her, then start getting paid. I'd been with Victoria for 3 years. She was brilliant with numbers and worked at a prestigious investment bank, but somewhere along the way, her pride in her career had twisted into something ugly. My role became simple. Be thankful that someone with her salary would even look at a software developer like me. The explosion happened on a Tuesday. She was scrolling through her portfolio returns on her phone while I made dinner. "You know, Alex, you'll never understand money. Not real money," she said, not even looking up. "6 figures is just my bonus. You should be grateful I'm not materialistic about your little coding projects." For 3 years, I'd listened to variations of this speech. How her Harvard friends barely tolerated me at dinners, how she was dating down because she was a good person, how my startup dreams were adorable. But that Tuesday, something inside me didn't crack. It hardened into clarity. I turned off the stove and looked at her. "Then go find someone in your tax bracket." Her fingers stopped scrolling. "Excuse me? We're done, Victoria. I'm not interested in being your charity case anymore." The dismissive laugh came immediately. "You're seriously breaking up with me? You'll never find someone successful who can tolerate your little startup fantasies. You need my connections, my network. Without me, you're just another programmer with delusions." I didn't argue. I just grabbed my laptop bag and started packing my things from her apartment. As I reached the door, she called out with practiced superiority, "Don't forget my firm's investor networking event on Friday. When you're not there, everyone will know you couldn't hack it in my world. It's going to be pathetic when you realize what you've thrown away." "I'll manage," I said, and left. What she didn't know was that I'd met Sophia at a hackathon 6 months earlier. She was a venture capitalist who'd actually offered to review my pitch deck, but I'd never followed up because Victoria had mocked the idea so thoroughly. That night, I sent Sophia a text, asking if her offer still stood. Her response came within minutes. "I've been waiting for you to reach out. Coffee Thursday?" Thursday afternoon, I met Sophia at a small cafe downtown. She went through my deck page by page, offering insights that actually built up the idea instead of tearing it down. "You know," she said, stirring her coffee, "my firm has pitch sessions every Friday. There's one tomorrow at 2. You should present." "Isn't that the same time as the Goldman networking event?" She smiled. "Better audience at ours. We actually write checks." Friday came fast. I wore my best suit and arrived at the venture firm's offices early. The conference room was filling up when I recognized a face on the panel of judges. Victoria's boss, Richard Ramirez, was sitting at the center of the table. In the audience, I spotted Victoria in her analyst seat, there to take notes for the partners. She saw me at the same moment. Her face went through several expressions, from shock to confusion to rage, finally settling on forced indifference. I delivered my presentation like my life depended on it. The questions from the panel were sharp but fair, and I could feel the room's energy shifting in my favor. Sophia's firm had already indicated interest as a potential lead investor, and other partners were leaning forward, engaged. Then Victoria stood up during the Q&A session. Her voice tried for professional concern, but cracked with something personal underneath. "I have a question about the founder's experience," she said. "Isn't this kind of complex for someone without real business experience? I mean, understanding actual market dynamics requires more than just coding ability." The room went quiet. Richard Ramirez's face showed clear discomfort at his analyst's oddly personal attack. The other panelists looked confused. I stayed calm and met her eyes. "You said it yourself, that you were doing charity work by dating someone who won't aim high in life. So that's what I'm doing." The color drained from Victoria's face as she realized I'd just exposed her cruelty. She sat down quickly, but the damage was done. The next week brought escalation I should have expected. First came the emails threatening legal action over intellectual property she claimed to have contributed to my startup idea. Then she contacted other venture firms, spreading rumors about my instability and unprofessional behavior. But I'd learned from watching her work. Documentation was everything. Sophia had recommended a lawyer who specialized in startup law, and we sent a cease and desist letter with screenshots of all Victoria's harassment. Monday morning, my phone rang. It was Richard Ramirez personally. "Alex, I want to apologize for Friday's inappropriate comments," he said. "We take professional conduct very seriously at Goldman. I've also heard concerning reports about contact with other firms. This is being handled internally." By Friday, I had term sheets from 3 firms, including Sophia's as the lead investor. The real satisfaction came 3 months later through the venture capital gossip network. Victoria had been quietly terminated for violating professional conduct standards. She'd applied to several other investment banks, but word travels fast in finance. She showed up at my door begging for forgiveness that very Tuesday. Her smile was warm and innocent, but I knew something. You see, I was now more successful than her in the only area of life that she truly cared about me. And if she was here, she wouldn't stop until my startup was destroyed. My hand moved to my phone in my pocket, and I hit record without looking down, keeping my eyes on her face as she shifted into her performance. She took a step closer, and her voice got softer, the way it used to when she wanted something expensive. Alex, losing my job was the best thing that happened to me, she said, and I watched her hands move in that practiced way she'd perfected during client presentations. It made me realize what I threw away. US, what we had together. I was so focused on money and status that I forgot what really mattered. She kept talking about growth and learning and how she'd been seeing a therapist. All the right words in the right order, like she'd rehearsed them in front of a mirror. Her eyes kept flicking to my apartment door behind me, probably calculating the square footage and comparing it to what she remembered. I counted the seconds in my head while she went through her whole speech about understanding my vision now and wanting to support my dreams. 3 minutes exactly, and then I held up my hand to stop her. Victoria, you need to leave. Right now. Any contact you want to make should go through my lawyer. The mask dropped for maybe half a second, and I saw pure rage flash across her face before she caught herself and rearranged her features back into that wounded expression. Alex, please, I just want to talk. Can't we even have a conversation after everything we shared? I stepped back and started to close the door, but she put her hand on it, her nails digging into the wood. You can't just shut me out like this. We need to discuss what happened between us. That's when the doorman appeared at the end of the hallway, probably alerted by the tension in my voice when I'd buzzed her up. Everything okay here, Mr. Biyun? He asked, and I saw him taking in the situation, Victoria's hand on my door, the space between us. This person is not welcome in this building, I said clearly. If she comes back, please call security immediately. Victoria's face went completely cold, that investment banker look she used to get when a deal fell through. She pulled her hand back slowly and straightened her blazer. This isn't over, she said quietly, then turned and walked past the doorman without another word. I thanked him and went back inside, my hands shaking slightly as I pulled out my phone to check the recording had captured everything. The audio was clear, every word of her fake apology and that threat at the end. I forwarded it to Simon Weiss, the lawyer Sophia had recommended when we'd dealt with the cease and desist letter months ago. He called me back within 20 minutes. Good thinking on the recording, he said. Document absolutely everything from now on. Every text, email, any contact at all. I'll send a formal cease and desist first thing tomorrow morning. Make sure building security has her photo. I spent the rest of the night going through my phone and laptop, changing passwords and checking what information might still be accessible. The next morning at our office, a converted loft space we'd rented with part of our seed funding, I pulled Deacon aside before our morning stand-up. Victoria showed up at my apartment last night, I said, and watched his face go serious immediately. He knew the whole history, had been there through the funding drama. We spent the next hour changing every password on every system, enabling two-factor authentication on everything from our AWS accounts to our GitHub repositories. We should check the access logs too, Deacon said, pulling up our code repository history. Make sure nobody's been poking around where they shouldn't be. Everything looked clean, but we exported the logs anyway, creating a paper trail in case we needed it later. That afternoon, Simon called again, and his voice had that careful tone lawyers use when they're about to deliver bad news. Victoria hired Martin Kowalski, he said. He's known for taking cases on contingency and throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Expect a claim that she contributed to your company's intellectual property during your relationship. My stomach tightened, but I'd half expected this. What do we do? Simon laid out the preparation we'd need, documentation showing the timeline of our product development, anything that proved the ideas were mine alone. Start gathering everything now. Emails, texts, notebooks, anything with timestamps. The next day, I met Sophia at her firm's offices, the same conference room where I'd pitched 6 months ago. I wanted to update you on a situation, I said, explaining Victoria's appearance and the legal threat. I watched her face carefully, worried this drama would make her reconsider their investment. She leaned back in her chair and actually smiled slightly. Alex, we've seen worse, much worse. A bitter ex with a contingency lawyer isn't going to scare us off, but we need to be proactive. She called in Leanna Sutherland, the senior associate who'd led our due diligence. Leanna listened to the situation and immediately started making notes. We need to accelerate the IP audit we'd planned for next quarter, she said. Get everything documented and filed properly. I've seen this playbook before. She's going to claim she gave you the idea or helped develop it. Leanna gave me a list of exactly what documentation we'd need to gather, patents to file, copyright registrations to complete. The good news is, bitter exes usually leave a trail of evidence against themselves, she said. That weekend, I sat at my kitchen table with 3 years of text messages and emails spread across my laptop screen, searching for anything Victoria might try to twist into a claim of contribution. Instead, I found message after message of her mocking my ideas. Your little app idea is cute, but it'll never make real money, one text read. Another email said my startup dreams were adorable, but ultimately pointless. I screenshotted everything and forwarded them to Simon, who responded immediately. "This is gold. Keep searching." I found more messages where she explicitly said she didn't understand tech, didn't care about my coding projects, thought the startup world was for people who couldn't get real jobs in finance. By Sunday night, I had a folder with over 200 screenshots showing her complete dismissal of everything I'd built. Monday morning started normal enough with our team stand-up, reviewing the sprint goals and checking our burn rate calculations. Then around 10:30, someone knocked on our office door. A man in a wrinkled suit stood there holding a manila envelope. "Alex Yoon?" he asked, and when I nodded, he handed me the envelope. "You've been served." My hands stayed steady as I opened it and read the complaint. Victoria was claiming she'd provided critical business insights that formed the foundation of our product. She wanted recognition as co-founder with a 50% equity stake, or $2 million in damages. I called Simon immediately and read him the key parts over the phone, while Deacon watched from his desk. Simon actually started laughing halfway through, which wasn't the reaction I expected. "This is honestly one of the weakest complaints I've seen in 15 years of practice," he said between chuckles. Her lawyer clearly took this on contingency, hoping you'd panic and settle quickly. He explained that the claims were so vague, they bordered on sanctionable, no specific contributions listed, no documentation referenced, just broad assertions about providing business insights. Within 2 days, Simon had our response ready to file. We denied everything and attached over 40 screenshots of Victoria's messages, where she called my ideas cute but pointless, and said they'd never make real money. Simon also filed a motion for Rule 11 sanctions against her lawyer for filing what was basically a frivolous lawsuit meant to harass us. The court clerk told Simon we'd probably get a hearing date within 3 weeks, which seemed forever away, but was actually pretty fast for the legal system. Meanwhile, Deacon was doing his usual security review when he found something weird in our GitHub logs. Someone had tried accessing our repository using an old credential that should have been deactivated months ago. The attempt failed, but the IP address traced to a coffee shop about 2 blocks from where Victoria's parents lived in the suburbs. We knew she was staying there because her LinkedIn showed she'd updated her location after losing her apartment. Deacon immediately rotated all our credentials and set up alerts for any suspicious access attempts. 3 days later, Regina called with her own warning. She'd been monitoring tech blogs and startup forums as part of our PR strategy when she picked up chatter about someone shopping a negative story about our company. The person was using a throwaway email, but claiming to have insider knowledge about unethical practices at our startup. Regina started reaching out to journalists she knew personally, giving them the real story about a bitter ex trying to destroy a company after being fired from her own job. She prepared a defensive media kit with our actual metrics, customer testimonials, and the court filings showing Victoria's harassment campaign. The emergency hearing got scheduled faster than expected, just 10 days after we filed our sanctions motion. The judge was clearly irritated about having to deal with what looked like a personal vendetta dressed up as a business dispute. Victoria's lawyer tried arguing the case had merit, but when the judge asked for specific examples of her contributions to our product, he couldn't provide any concrete details. Then Victoria stood up without permission and started talking about how she'd helped design our user interface during dinners and weekend conversations. The judge asked for evidence, any sketches, emails, messages, anything showing her involvement. Victoria just kept repeating vague claims about conversations over dinner and how I must have deleted the proof. The judge told her to sit down and warned her lawyer about controlling his client. That same week, Leanna called from Sophia's firm saying they'd received an anonymous tip claiming I'd stolen code from my previous employer to build our product. Leanna had already started investigating, pulling my old employment agreement and comparing our code base to my former company's public repositories. Within hours, she confirmed it was completely false, since the technologies weren't even similar. We used Python and React, while my old company was all Java and Angular. But it showed Victoria was getting desperate, throwing anything at the wall to see what would stick. The stress was getting to me, so I finally made an appointment with Pat, the therapist my insurance covered. She listened to the whole story and helped me see that Victoria's escalating tactics actually showed she was losing control, not gaining it. People who are winning don't need to try 17 different attacks, Pat explained while I sat on her worn leather couch. She's panicking because nothing's working. Pat gave me breathing exercises and helped me recognize that my anxiety was actually reasonable, given someone was actively trying to destroy my life's work. 2 days before our next board meeting, our pilot customer called me directly. They'd received an anonymous email warning them about potential legal issues with our company and suggesting they might get dragged into litigation. I spent 2 hours on a video call walking them through every detail of the situation, showing them the court documents and our lawyer's assessment. They asked tough questions about our stability and whether this drama would affect our ability to deliver. I showed them our development roadmap, our backup plans, and introduced them to Deacon so they could see we had a solid technical team, regardless of any legal noise. They decided to continue with us, actually impressed by our transparency and how professionally we were handling the attacks. The sanctions hearing finally arrived 3 weeks after our initial filing. The judge had clearly read all the documents and wasn't happy about his time being wasted. He grilled Victoria's lawyer about the basis for the lawsuit, asking why they'd filed such vague claims without any supporting evidence. The lawyer tried arguing they needed discovery to find the evidence, but the judge pointed out, "You need some factual basis to even get to discovery." Then the judge turned to our side and asked Simon about our sanctions motion. Simon calmly laid out how this was textbook harassment litigation, filed without any reasonable investigation into whether the claims had merit. The judge took less than 5 minutes to rule in our favor, ordering Victoria and her lawyer to pay our legal fees for the frivolous filing. Her lawyer immediately asked for permission to withdraw from representation, clearly wanting nothing more to do with this disaster. 3 days later, Victoria filed her own paperwork at the courthouse without any lawyer helping her. The document was 15 pages of random complaints jumping from topic to topic without any legal structure. She claimed I stole her ideas, then said I was incompetent, then accused me of emotional abuse, then demanded compensation for lost opportunities from our relationship. Simon called me after reviewing it and actually sounded happy about this mess. He explained that judges hate these kinds of emotional rants because they show the person isn't really hurt, just mad. The court clerk had already flagged it as potentially problematic since it didn't follow basic filing rules. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unexpected name on the screen. Richard Ramirez was calling from his personal number, not his Goldman line. He apologized again for what happened at the pitch meeting and said he felt responsible for not seeing Victoria's behavior patterns earlier. He told me she'd tried similar stuff when they fired her, making wild claims about discrimination and stolen work. Richard offered to write a statement for our case if we needed it, explaining her history of false accusations at Goldman. I thanked him, but said we'd probably be fine since she was making our case for us with every new filing. The next morning, Deacon and I pushed our beta version live to our first test users. We'd been so focused on the legal drama that actually shipping code felt weird and normal at the same time. The feedback started coming in within hours, and it was mostly positive. Users liked how stable the platform was and how intuitive the interface felt. One user found a small bug in the payment flow, which Deacon fixed in 20 minutes. Another suggested a feature we'd already planned for the next release. By the end of the day, we had 30 active beta users putting real data through our system. Deacon looked at the metrics dashboard and pointed out that our uptime was perfect despite everything else going on. We were actually building something good while Victoria wasted her energy attacking us. Regina called me that evening with interesting news. A tech blog reporter had reached out to her about a story they'd received from an anonymous source claiming our company was facing serious legal troubles. The reporter wanted Regina's comment before running the piece. Regina had immediately sent over the court documents, showing the sanctions ruling against Victoria and her lawyer. She also included the judge's comments about the frivolous nature of the lawsuit. The reporter read through everything and called Regina back within an hour. They weren't going to run the story, because it was obviously just someone trying to use them for revenge. Regina suspected Victoria had pitched it to multiple outlets, but most journalists could smell a hit piece from miles away. 2 nights later, I was at a startup networking event downtown when I spotted Victoria near the entrance. She was talking loudly to anyone who would listen, holding court about legal issues in the startup world. I tried to avoid her, but she saw me and started moving through the crowd in my direction. She cornered 2 potential customers I'd been talking to and started telling them about our lawsuit. Her voice got louder as she described how I'd stolen everything from her. People started backing away from her, clearly uncomfortable with the scene she was creating. Security noticed the disturbance and approached her. She tried to argue with them, but they firmly walked her to the exit. After she left, 3 different founders came up to me. They'd all dealt with similar situations and wanted to offer support. One gave me his lawyer's card in case I needed a second opinion. Another offered to be a reference if any customers had concerns. The third just bought me a beer and said these things happen when you start succeeding. Meanwhile, Leanna was putting together our first official board meeting presentation. She went through all our numbers and realized something surprising. Despite spending time and money on legal defense, we were actually ahead of our development milestones. The distraction had forced us to focus only on what really mattered. We'd cut out all the extra features we'd been considering and just built the core product our customers needed. Our burn rate was higher than planned because of legal fees, but our product was further along than projected. Leanna noted this in her board deck as an unexpected silver lining. She also prepared answers for any questions about the legal situation, though she doubted the board would care much, given how well we were executing. 3 weeks after Victoria filed her rambling complaint, Simon got a call from a new lawyer claiming to represent her. This lawyer seemed more professional and immediately offered to settle everything for $50,000. Simon didn't even pretend to consider it. He told the lawyer to review the case file, especially the sanctions ruling, and then call back if he still thought his client had any claim at all. We never heard from that lawyer again. The next day, Sophia got a call from a partner at another venture firm. He'd heard rumors about our legal troubles at a conference and wanted to know if he should be concerned about co-investing. Sophia calmly walked him through the actual situation, including the sanctions and Victoria's failed attempts to create problems. The partner listened to everything, and then surprised Sophia by saying he was more interested now. Any founder who could handle this kind of attack while still shipping product was someone worth backing. He asked for an intro to discuss joining our next round. That weekend, Regina noticed something odd in our product reviews online. 5 new accounts had all left 1-star reviews within an hour, all with similar grammar mistakes and complaints. The accounts had been created the same day and had no other activity. Regina documented everything and reported them to the platform for violating terms of service. The reviews were gone within 2 hours. She set up alerts for any similar patterns and caught 3 more attempts over the next few days. Each time, the fake accounts were removed quickly once reported. Finally, the court scheduled a settlement conference for the following month. The mediator assigned to our case had reviewed all the filings and wasn't subtle about his opinion. He told Victoria in the pre-conference call that she should seriously consider dropping the case before facing more sanctions. The mediation room was small and stuffy, with Victoria sitting across from me at the conference table, while the mediator shuffled through papers between us. Victoria kept tapping her pen against the table and avoiding eye contact as the mediator laid out the basic facts of the case. After about 20 minutes of reviewing documents, Victoria suddenly slammed her hand on the table and started crying. She said she couldn't stand watching me succeed after Goldman fired her, and she'd lost everything she'd worked for. The mediator pushed a box of tissues toward her and suggested maybe she should focus on rebuilding her own career instead of trying to tear down what others were building. Victoria kept crying for another 5 minutes while Simon sat next to me taking notes on his legal pad. The mediator proposed a simple settlement where Victoria would drop all her claims and we'd both agree to a mutual non-disparagement clause with $50,000 penalties for any violations. Victoria's face turned red when she heard she'd get nothing except an end to the legal proceedings, but her lawyer whispered something about the sanctions, and she finally nodded. Simon added that we wanted a comprehensive non-contact provision that would bar Victoria from approaching me, our company, our employees, or our investors, either directly or through third parties. The mediator wrote everything down and said violations of the non-contact order would result in immediate legal action and potential criminal charges for harassment. Victoria signed the papers without looking at me and left the room while her lawyer stayed behind to finalize details with Simon. 2 weeks later, the settlement was fully executed, and I could finally focus on the startup without checking over my shoulder every 5 minutes. Our burn rate was running about 30% higher than planned because of all the legal fees, but Sophia helped us adjust our financial projections and extend our runway by cutting some non-essential expenses. She connected us with a CFO consultant who showed us how to stretch our capital another 6 months if we stayed disciplined about spending. The relief of not dealing with Victoria's attacks let Deacon and me actually focus on building the product, but that's when we hit our first real disagreement about technical architecture. He wanted to rebuild our entire backend to make it more scalable, while I thought we should focus on adding features our pilot customers were requesting. We spent 3 days going back and forth with increasingly tense Slack messages before realizing we needed an actual decision framework instead of just arguing. We created a simple scoring system for technical decisions based on customer impact, development time, and long-term scalability that helped us prioritize what to build next. The pilot customer who'd stuck with us through all the legal drama finally signed a full contract after their 3-month beta period ended. The contract value was about 40% below our original projections, but it was real money from a real customer who actually used our product every day. Deacon and I celebrated with takeout Chinese food in our tiny office, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were actually building a real company. Pat pointed out during our next session that I'd been working 14-hour days for 3 months straight as a way to avoid thinking about everything Victoria had put me through. She helped me see that burning myself out wouldn't make the company successful and might actually hurt our chances if I crashed from exhaustion. I started leaving the office by 7 p.m. most nights and reconnected with friends I hadn't seen since the whole Victoria situation started. My college roommate couldn't believe everything that had happened, and we spent a whole Saturday just playing video games like we used to. The second board meeting came up faster than expected, and Sophia walked us through what the other board members would want to see. She reviewed our sales pipeline spreadsheet and immediately pointed out that we were being way too optimistic about how fast enterprise customers would make decisions. She explained that most enterprise sales cycles took 6 to 9 months minimum, and we needed to adjust our revenue projections accordingly. The actual board meeting went smoothly with the other investors, asking good questions about our product roadmap and customer acquisition costs. They seemed satisfied with our progress despite the legal expenses and approved our adjusted budget for the next quarter. A week later, I was grabbing coffee when I literally bumped into someone who'd worked with Victoria at Goldman. He mentioned she'd found a job at a small boutique firm, but was under strict supervision after everything that happened. Part of me felt satisfied hearing she was struggling, but mostly I just felt tired of even thinking about her at all. I changed the subject to the weather and got out of there as fast as possible. The next big milestone was making our first real hire beyond just Deacon and me. We needed someone who could actually sell to enterprise customers, and Sophia introduced us to a woman who'd worked at Goldman years ago before moving into software sales. During the interview, she mentioned she'd heard about the Victoria situation through the Goldman network, but said she'd seen similar drama before and it didn't concern her. She understood our product immediately and had great ideas about which companies to target, first based on her industry connections. We made her an offer that afternoon, and she accepted 2 days later, becoming our first official employee with a real salary and equity package. Regina called me the next week with an idea about getting our pilot success into the tech press without mentioning any of the legal mess. She'd already drafted a press release focusing on the technical problem we solved and sent it to 3 tech reporters she knew from previous clients. Within 2 days, TechCrunch picked up the story and ran a piece about our innovative approach to enterprise data management. The article got shared around LinkedIn and Twitter, bringing in leads from companies I'd never even heard of. Our inbox started filling with demo requests and partnership inquiries. Simon sent me an email 3 months after the settlement, confirming Victoria had followed every term perfectly, with no violations or attempts at contact. I realized while reading his message that I hadn't thought about her in weeks, because we were too busy shipping product updates and onboarding new users. The legal drama felt like something from another lifetime. Sophia called a runway review meeting where we went through our burn rate and realized the legal costs had eaten more cash than planned. We had maybe 8 months left at our current spending rate, which meant we needed to raise a bridge round sooner than expected. She started making introductions to other investors who might want to participate. The first meeting was with a partner at a firm that focused on enterprise software. He spent 2 hours grilling us about our technical architecture and go-to-market strategy, but never once asked about the lawsuit. The second investor wanted to see our customer retention metrics and unit economics. The third one brought their whole partnership to watch us demo the product. Each meeting felt like progress towards something real, instead of just defending against attacks. Deacon posted job listings for 2 engineering positions and got over 100 applications in the first week. He narrowed it down to 10 candidates, and we spent 3 days doing technical interviews. The 2 engineers we hired were both excited about the actual problems we were solving, not just the equity package. One had worked at Oracle for 5 years and wanted to build something new. The other came from a failed startup and appreciated our focus on sustainable growth. Our office transformed over the next month as the new team settled in. We started doing daily stand-ups at 9:30, where everyone shared what they were working on. Lunch became this communal thing where we'd order food and argue about technical decisions or joke about customer feature requests. Inside jokes developed naturally, like how we'd always blame the printer for any bug we couldn't immediately explain. The whole energy shifted from defensive to creative. My phone buzzed one afternoon with a LinkedIn notification that Victoria had viewed my profile. I stared at it for maybe 10 seconds, wondering what she was checking on, then deleted the notification without clicking through to see her profile. Whatever she was doing now wasn't my problem or my interest. The bridge round negotiations moved faster than expected once we had 3 firms interested. They competed on terms, which pushed our valuation up and gave us better conditions than we'd hoped for. The round closed with 18 months of runway, enough time to reach profitability if we executed well. Sophia mentioned over coffee that our ability to handle the legal drama while still shipping product had actually impressed the new investors. They saw it as proof we could handle adversity. 6 months after Victoria showed up at my door, I was cooking pasta in my apartment when this feeling hit me. Not revenge or vindication or relief from anxiety, just genuine happiness about what we were building. The company was real, the team was solid, and customers actually loved our product. I ate dinner while reviewing our product roadmap and felt excited about the problems we'd solve next. Our sales lead closed our second pilot customer through a referral from the first one. The new customer was twice as big and willing to pay more for additional features. The enterprise sales cycle was slow, taking months of demos and security reviews, but each win felt earned through actual value delivery rather than connections or luck. 3 weeks later, we rented a cabin 2 hours outside the city for our first company off-site. The whole team piled into cars Friday morning with boxes of snacks and too much coffee. Deacon drove while our sales lead navigated, and the engineers argued about database architecture in the back seat. The cabin had this huge main room with a fireplace where we set up whiteboards and sticky notes everywhere. Saturday morning, we started talking about what kind of company we wanted to build. Everyone threw out ideas about transparency and supporting each other and focusing on solving real problems instead of just looking impressive. We wrote everything down on the whiteboards, crossing out stuff that sounded too corporate and keeping the parts that felt genuine. By Sunday afternoon, we had 5 core values documented that actually meant something to all of us. Monday, back at the office, my inbox had an email from Richard at Goldman congratulating us on our funding announcement he'd seen in TechCrunch. He mentioned Goldman was looking for vendors in our space and suggested we should talk. I typed a polite thank you and said we were focused on our current customer pipeline, but appreciated him thinking of us. The next 6 weeks became this intense push to ship our biggest product update yet. Deacon and I spent late nights at the office working through technical problems that neither of us could have solved alone. He figured out this caching solution that made my algorithm run 3 times faster. I found a way to simplify his data model that cut our storage costs in half. The whole team stayed late the night before launch, testing every feature and fixing last-minute bugs. When we finally pushed the update live at 2 in the morning, everyone cheered and then immediately crashed on the office couches. Customer feedback started coming in the next day, and it was better than we'd hoped. They loved the new features, and our support tickets actually went down because the interface was clearer. Thursday afternoon, I had my regular session with Pat, and she suggested we could move to monthly check-ins instead of weekly. She pulled out her notes from our first session a year ago and showed me how different my stress responses were now. I wasn't constantly seeking validation or worrying about what other people thought. Setting boundaries had become natural instead of terrifying. We scheduled our next appointment for a month out, and I realized I wasn't anxious about the gap. A few days later marked exactly 1 year since we'd launched the company. We weren't on any magazine covers or raising $100 million rounds. We had 12 paying customers, a team of 8 people, and enough revenue to cover 70% of our costs. The growth chart went steadily up and to the right without any hockey stick moments. Success looked nothing like what Victoria used to describe at her banking dinners, but it felt solid and real. Sophia asked me to grab coffee the following week at our usual spot downtown. She ordered her regular latte and pulled out her tablet with our metrics dashboard. Our customer retention was 95%, and our burn rate had dropped every quarter. She said we were one of her firm's most promising companies, not because we were the flashiest, but because we actually delivered what we promised. Her partners were using us as an example of sustainable growth at their annual meeting. Walking back to the office, I scrolled through my phone and saw a news alert about Victoria's new boutique firm closing their first decent-sized deal. The article had a photo of her signing documents with some pharmaceutical executives. She looked professional and focused, not the desperate person who'd shown up at my door months ago. I genuinely hoped she was finding her way forward and building something better than what we'd had. That afternoon, I stood in our office watching the team collaborate on planning the next product release. Deacon was sketching architecture diagrams while our engineers debated implementation details. Our sales lead was on the phone with a customer getting feedback on proposed features. The designer was mocking up interfaces based on actual user needs instead of assumptions. Everyone was building something together, not trying to tear anyone else down. The whole scene made me realize something important about the last year. The best revenge hadn't been watching Victoria fail or proving her wrong about my potential. It was building something meaningful with people who actually supported each other while she exhausted herself trying to destroy what we'd created. Her attacks had only made us stronger because they forced us to document everything and build better processes. Every legal threat taught us to be more careful, and every sabotage attempt made us more resilient. We'd grown not in spite of her harassment, but because surviving it required us to become better at everything we did. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing. Nothing over the top, just how it happened. Thanks for hanging out with me. It always feels like chatting with a buddy. We'll do it again next time.